of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things, but on this podcast specifically, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. You can make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be recapping Kentucky basketball's 75-66 win over the Ole Miss Rebels. Very impressed with some individual performances in this game. Going to talk overall stats, what I thought about the game, what I thought about some of the individual performances, and then also we're going to take ourselves back to Kentucky's KenPom page. Going to be talking about where we think the Wildcats are heading now that they are officially past this Kansas loss that could have been honestly a season-defining moment for them. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Again, want to remind everybody out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to the show. It is absolutely free, and it would mean a ton to us here at Locked On Kentucky. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Like I mentioned, 75-66, Wildcats are victorious in Oxford, Mississippi. They moved to 15-7 on the year, 6-3 in the conference. Doesn't it just feel like just a short amount of time ago, just a few days ago, where South Carolina had come into Rupp Arena and defeated the Kentucky Wildcats? Now, all of a sudden, that game was almost a month ago, and here we are now, having seen Kentucky win 5 out of their last 6 games. Yes, that's right, 5 out of their last 6, and they went from a negative record in the SEC to all of a sudden 6-3 and right back in the thick of things. That's the thing I want to note first here before I dive into the game, and we'll talk about this later on in the show. Kentucky's not out of anything yet. In fact, they are very much so still in everything, and that's something that I thought would not have been possible after that South Carolina game. I thought, and I said it on the show, that the season was dead, it was over, and that things just didn't necessarily matter, considering what happened from here on out was irrelevant because it didn't look like Kentucky was going to make the NCAA tournament. Now, they need some resume help. They certainly need to get some more quad one wins on their resume, and they're going to have opportunities to do that. But nothing has changed since that South Carolina loss as far as things being determined. Nothing has been decided. Now Kentucky all of a sudden has an opportunity to go on a 4-game win streak here, I believe, over these next few contests, and the momentum's back, I think. I don't think it ever lost. Truly, that Kansas game, I think, was just the definition of a better team beating a worse opponent, and sure, it was on the road, and sure, it was in a difficult environment, but Kansas was just the better ball club. I truly do believe that. When you look at this game individually against Ole Miss, first thing I want to note here is that the Rebels are, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, we beat them, oh, and it's sad, like the state of their team, but Ole Miss basketball is kind of dead right now. I mean, it would have been embarrassing if Kentucky had lost to what is now a 9-13 team, 1-8 in the SEC. And at halftime, Kentucky looked like they had stretched the lead to about 5. They looked like they were going to build some momentum, and then Ole Miss was able to come back into this one, make it a tie game at halftime. Oscar Tshiebwe and Sahvir Wheeler, I think that the combination of those two guys in this game was very apparent. Wheeler having obviously to play because Cason Wallace was out with an injury. He was inserted back into the starting lineup. He went 2 of 8 from the floor, and that's kind of where I want to start here when breaking down the individual performances. He went 2 of 8 from the floor, but he also finished with 9 assists, and I just want to remind you guys, kind of rotationally how Cal has decided to move forward with this. I mean, this is what Sahvir Wheeler does, and to be honest with you, I think it does work best coming off the bench. That's what Sahvir Wheeler has been kind of the spark plug over these last few games, and I think that's how Cal should roll with it moving forward. Just because you have 9 assists coming back to it does not mean, okay, fine, we put you back in the rotation at the starting 1. I think Cal and this staff have made their decision. I think it is the right decision to bench Sahvir Wheeler. It would be shocking to me if they came back next game, Cason Wallace was 100% healthy, and they ended up starting Sahvir Wheeler. He could end up, Sahvir could, starting this Saturday against Florida because Cason Wallace is not 100%, and they're just trying to get him working back into a little bit more of a rhythm. That could be the possibility, right? I don't think that's the case as long-term for this season. I don't think that, Cason Wallace is going to be the guy that's kind of left out of this just because he gets hurt. I think that he is overall probably the better point guard there, and Sahvir Wheeler's role, I think, certainly does fit him coming off the bench as that spark plug. When you look at some of the other impressive performances, I mean, you can't not immediately also point out the fact that Antonio Reeves showed why he was such a valuable pickup from Illinois State. So in case you didn't see it, Antonio Reeves, from the get-go, I mean, from off rip, was absolutely on fire for the Wildcats. He finished with 27 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. He was 8 of 12 from the floor, 6 of 7 from beyond the arc, and Ole Miss just simply struggled to contain him, whether that be in transition or whether that be in the half-court offense. I mean, Kentucky was just able to find him time and time again. Reeves, again, showing that he can, in fact, play ball in the SEC. Now that we're kind of, winding down the regular season, I think it's fair to start assessing some of these players. When it comes to guys like Antonio Reeves, I mean, I'm impressed. He was obviously averaging over 20 a game at his previous stop. A lot of people had questions about whether or not he could truly make that jump to the SEC, and I think that he's shown several times against SEC opponents that he can come out and put on a good showing. He had 18 points in that upset win over Tennessee. He had 23 points in the win over Texas A&M. He had 27 last night. He had 20 against one of the best teams in the country, arguably the best team in the nation against Alabama. I mean, he can score. The dude knows how to score against really good competition, and I was very impressed with the way that he handled himself in this game after not having a good performance in the slightest against Kansas, especially late. Kentucky had several opportunities. I believe he had a couple shots go up that didn't go in. But yeah, 5 of 5 from the free throw line as well, and that's also the next place I want to get to here. So we mentioned just a few games ago that free throw shooting would probably become more important for Kentucky as the season went on, and we saw some really good things from the Wildcats in that Tennessee game, right? Since that Tennessee game, previously, before that, Kentucky had lost to South Carolina. So they've played, obviously, the Vols on the road. They played Georgia, A&M, Vanderbilt, Kansas, and Ole Miss. On the year, Kentucky is shooting 68.9% from the foul line. In that Tennessee game, and then from there on out, Kentucky has shot 76.7% from the foul line. They're averaging 20 free throws a game that they are taking, knocking down about 15 of them, and that's what you want to see. You want to see your team getting to the foul line more efficiently as the season progresses, and you want to see them knocking down those shots. You don't want to see Kentucky getting cold from the foul line down the stretch, and they have completely, I think, turned it around when it comes to that department. Shout out Jacob Toppin. Shout out Oscar Tshiebwe for having a really good night from the stripe, as well as Antonio Reeves. You need to put the ball in your free throw shooters' hands whenever you want to try and draw those types of fouls. Kentucky did that. Kentucky got out and paced themselves very well in this game. Oscar Tshiebwe, I think, played a lot better defense when it comes to the pick and roll stuff. Jacob Toppin as well was not good, wasn't great by any means, but I certainly thought they got the job done. And overall, there were 3 individual performances in this game that I thought were very impressive that just kind of carried what was essentially a limited rotation. There's not a whole lot, I think, that you can truly take away from this. I thought Kentucky was going to win. I predicted them to win. I thought that Kentucky was going to be able to go out and get this one done. I didn't think that there was anything on paper that led me to believe that Ole Miss would be able to get out of what has been an extremely cold year offensively for them. I just did not think that they would be able to pull out of it. And, that's essentially it. What does surprise me, though, and maybe this is because of the limited rotation, Kentucky ended up shooting 48.1% from the floor, 50% from 3. They only took 12 3-point shots in this game, and then they ended up shooting, like I mentioned, 82.6% from the foul line. Maybe Kentucky's just kind of figured out their offensive identity, which is getting downhill quickly and getting to the rim. I'm going to say this, and I don't think I mentioned this in the Kansas game, and I'll say it now that we've gotten 2 games essentially through that. Kentucky has run some really interesting concepts, I think, on the offensive end of the floor. at times. I've noticed different sets where I've been impressed with even if the shot didn't go in, I've been impressed with the setup to get it to that point. I think Kentucky is continuing to try new things. And against a team like Ole Miss, I mean, there were several things that Ole Miss saw that Kansas saw that Ole Miss couldn't defend and Kansas could. And I also think it's vice versa. I think Kentucky saw a lot of things from Ole Miss, pick and roll wise, that they just were able to handle differently because Ole Miss is a lesser talented team. I don't really know how else you chalk this one up other than that Kentucky's best players performed well against a team that is not good. Jacob Toppin had 18 points in this contest. He was 7 of 14 from the floor, 4 of 4 from the foul line, had 4 assists as well. A lot of Wildcats getting in action when it comes to being on the receiving end of a lot of passes from Jacob Toppin and Sahvir Wheeler. Really impressed with the way that the Wildcats shared the basketball tonight, I think, especially when you look at those numbers from those two guys. And yeah, Jacob Toppin continues to play like that first rounder that we were talking about just a few episodes ago, saying, hey, this guy is being severely overrated, and here he is with another what almost feels like quiet 18 points. I don't want to necessarily say too quiet, but I definitely think that a lot of people are overlooking what this kid's doing right now. He's had 21, 24, 17, 12, 14, 18, just a couple of different impressive points per game averages for a kid that was not doing a whole lot on the offensive end for Kentucky before this year. A lot of you commented about this, about what he was doing in the Bahamas and how he's kind of switched things up. And, that's just kind of where he is now, I think. I think he's elevated himself to this point where we can trust him to get a consistent maybe 9 to 18 points a night. And that's something where now I think Kentucky's trying to expect to lean on that. And I'm curious to see if Jacob Toppin can deliver. I want to kind of continue to take a dive into what this team has kind of did in this game, what Ole Miss didn't do in this game. And then I also want to talk about where Kentucky could be heading from here because it's all positive notes, guys. It's all positive stuff from here. Before I get to that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On. They are the #1 sportsbook in America. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. And you can download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to the point spreads, whoever will score a touchdown. It's Super Bowl 57, so they're going to have a million different props for you to check out. It's all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. If you've not subscribed to the show already, it would mean a ton here to us at Locked On Kentucky. If you did, if you're listening on podcast, please leave a 5-star review for the show. And if you are on Apple Podcast, you can let us know what your thoughts about the show as well. Kentucky, a player that I did not mention, Oscar Tshiebwe, ended up going 4 of 10 in this game, occasionally struggling with the mid-range jumper. Kentucky apparently felt comfortable to let him take a few more outside shots than maybe he would have normally in this contest. I was impressed with the way that Oscar battled through it, though. Sometimes you see players get down, sometimes you see players get upset, and it was not that kind of night for Oscar Tshiebwe, who ended up finishing with 14 points on the night. Really impressed overall with the 3 players in Jacob Toppin, Oscar Tshiebwe, and Antonio Reeves just kind of getting it done. They're doing what they do best, statistically and individually, and it was just kind of hey, we're gonna do what we do, and we're going to go out and execute. Antonio Reeves also, you got to be impressed with the way that he got to the rim at times last night. He's not just a one-trick pony. He was not brought in as a shooter, right? He was not brought in as just he's going to be our three-point guy. And to be honest with you, I sat here in this offseason and questioned about whether or not Antonio Reeves was going to be able to step up and be that three-point presence because of how poorly he shot from beyond the arc his 2 seasons prior. So, props to those 3 guys. Props to Kentucky. Props for Cal continuing to adjust. It's all positive momentum, all positive vibes, I think, heading into this 3-game stretch here. Now that we've gotten past Ole Miss, I said that Kentucky was more than likely going to win their next 4. I felt really good about it. There's 1 down, 3 to go. You've got 2 home games, and then to cap it all off, you got a road trip against the Georgia Bulldogs. But this Saturday, you've got a game against Florida that I think is more than winnable because of how inconsistent Florida's offense has been this season. You've got a game against Arkansas, which is going to be tight. That's going to be a very difficult game. But what I keep going back to is, hey, if Kentucky can beat the Razorbacks, if Kentucky can beat the Volunteers, they can certainly beat the Razorbacks. At least that's kind of been my stance as well. If you look down the stretch here and you see a really difficult game on the schedule, i.e. Auburn, Florida, Tennessee again, Arkansas twice, you would like to think that, well, they can take those teams on because they've proven that they can beat the best teams in the SEC. And currently, like we said on yesterday's show, well, not yesterday's show prior, the number 1 team in the nation according to KenPom, the Tennessee Volunteers. You've got those 3 games, right? Florida, Arkansas, and Georgia. And then you've got a game on the road against Mississippi State. And I don't know why KenPom doesn't feel great about that one. I feel much better about that one than most, I think, because stylistically how these 2 teams match up should be interesting. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for Mississippi State just to run away with this one. I think it's either a close win for the Bulldogs or it's Kentucky ending up getting a not double-digit dub, but a comfortable dub on the road there. I don't know why. We can dive into that whenever we get to that, but there is something I may have to eat crow on, a statement that I made last month at this point, talking about how Kentucky basketball I did not think was going to get to 20 wins. Coming into the SEC slate, I said I didn't think it was going to happen. Here we are now. We only need 5 more. There are 9 more games in the regular season left. Kentucky is projected to win 5 of those, so they're projected to get right to that 20-win mark. And it's great and all. It's phenomenal that Kentucky's able to get to that mark, and they're able to kind of, rebound from what was a very rough first 16 games of the season. It hasn't even happened yet, but I'm sitting here projecting out like it will. But it's all, I think, relative to how Kentucky handles these individual opponents, right? So we've discussed so much here recently on the show about how important maybe the net rankings and how important maybe who you beat here is relative to how many wins you get. Because if, let's say, Kentucky wins 5 more games and they finish the year 20-11 before heading to Nashville for the SEC tournament. By the way, I will be hitting y'all up in Nashville for the SEC tournament in case any of you guys are going to be heading that way. I can only imagine you are. But they could win 5 more games, go 20-11, but they could also win out. They could go 24 and whatever, 24-9 here, 24-7, excuse me. And I think that it's really important that you focus in on, if you're going to win these 20 games, getting those wins against Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi State, because it's all relative to who you beat. We've said that so much here recently on the show. You could win out, that would be awesome. You'd be cruising along in. I'm not leaving that possibility out. You could lose all these games and then your dreams would be crushed. If you go 20-11, you go 21-10, 22-9, somewhere around there. It doesn't really matter that you get those 22 wins if you don't pick up some more quality resume building victories. That's what you have to go out and do at this point. So you've got those chances. It's just a question of whether or not you can execute. And I've continued to go back to the fact that it's momentum. I think that Kentucky, I don't want to necessarily call it peaking because they're having to grind some of these games out. I mean, that Ole Miss game last night was not just like I'm not going to sit here and say it was just an easy victory. It was a 9-point win. It wasn't even a double-digit victory. But it was a game where Kentucky just kind of, struggled, I think, at times in the first half, struggled at times in the second, but was able to pull away because they were a better team. You're not going to be able to kind of sleepwalk through moments against better opponents here down this stretch. You've got to be able to wake up, focus up, and get ready. But it's that momentum and that confidence, that mental side of the game that I think Kentucky has an edge with right now that maybe some of these other teams don't. Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, who is currently 1-8 in SEC play. Mississippi State started off the year so strongly. We talked on them on this show before SEC play started about being a team that could potentially finish somewhere around the top 5 or 6, maybe even fourth in the SEC if they continue to play as good of defense as they were. And they've fallen off the face of the earth. Some of these teams may be dealing with some confidence issues right now. Kentucky can go in and absolutely take care of business and execute because of the way that Calipari has this team feeling. That's my opinion on that. I truly believe that Kentucky can go win these next 3. I'm not quite sure how they're going to finish the end of the year. It's going to be really interesting. Games against Tennessee, Auburn, and Arkansas again to end the season. Those are going to be ones to watch for Kentucky. It's going to really be able to tell whether or not they've adjusted, they've matured, they've moved past that Kansas game, which if it were me, I keep talking about that game. If it were me, I would be destroyed if that were me. But I think that Kentucky is able to kind of handle things and get things right here as the year winds down. I'm very excited to see what Kentucky does over these next 3 games because, hey, look, if that happens, you're 18-7. You're almost knocking on the door of the top 25 again, which is not relevant. I mean, at this point in the game, if you're getting in the tournament and you're getting in somewhere between a 7 and 10 seed, 6 and 10 seed, I mean, who cares about whether or not you're ranked in the AP poll? But yeah, this is the stretch. You got 1 down. Can you get a few more down before you face Tennessee again? That's my thought on all of that. If you've got any thoughts on that, you can leave it in the YouTube comments below, or you can hit me on the socials at Locked On UK. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Again, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.